Hello and welcome to the Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. This week our guest is the pioneering YouTuber, podcast host, and Democratic thought leader, Brian Tyler Cohen. Now remember, we love taking your questions, so write in to politicswarroom@gmail.com or send a tweet to @Politicon for next week's show. We'll get to as many as we can, but don't forget to tell us where you're from. In other exciting news, the documentary Carville, Winning is Everything Stupid, is now streaming on Max. Get updates and some great behind-the-scenes content by following James on Twitter @JamesCarville and on his new TikTok @RealJamesCarville, at least through January 19th. You can also get the text updates about what's next for Politicon and Politics War Room by signing up at politicon.com. So tell your friends about us and remind them to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please check out the links to our sponsors, Beam, Zbiotics, and HelloFresh in our show notes. We thank you for supporting these sponsors. It really helps make this podcast happen. Hey, James, there's so much to cover, almost all of it bad. But let's start. The California wildfires are one of the worst natural disasters. Billions of dollars destroyed, dozens of people killed. It's just a terrible tragedy. And America, our national government, responds to crises like this, whether California, Florida, Louisiana, North Carolina, except some Trumpites and Mike Johnson, the scared House Speaker, talks about tying it to the debt ceiling or something else, so Democrats have to vote for it. Another Louisianan who has forgotten the federal government poured some $100 billion into Louisiana after the 2005 Katrina disaster is Senator John Kennedy, a man who thinks he's funny, but he's really a mean buffoon. Now, North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis and even Florida's Rick Scott will put the kibosh on this craziness. They know how crucial federal aid was to their constituents in hurricane disasters in the last couple of years. You know, we can find out later if there's local blame and maybe even start to recognize the real villain here is climate. But it is sickening when these cheap politicians want to play games with people's suffering and lives.
Yeah, sometimes you have to look at something like this, as tragic as it is, as pathetic as all of this is. And I mean, it's really pathetic. But the best, again, comes from Jim Jordan, who says they should move the Olympics from Los Angeles to a red state where they know how to run things. Like Jim Jordan knew how to run a wrestling team at Ohio State.
Oh, but James, keep that doctor away. I mean, if they move us to Ohio State, don't let that doctor that Jim Jordan covered up for.
It was molesting young athletes. I guess what doesn't stun me is you look at a John Kennedy, you look at a Jim Jordan. At what point did these people become divorced from any sense of reality or shame or self-awareness or anything else? Usually that acts as a governor on people's behavior. You know, if I were starting to attack some politician for being a philanderer, I would be fully aware that somebody said, well, you work for Bill Clinton. Didn't he have an issue with that? You know, so you're kind of aware of generally where you pick your fights. They don't even have that normal governor, that normal thing that normal people have. They attack for something that they are so guilty of themselves. It's unbelievable. I just don't understand when we lost that. I think to some extent conservatives used to think you had to have a sense of shame. That's all gone out the window with everything else.
Well, you're absolutely right. And of course, this is even worse. You did not hear, and I give Rick Scott and Tom Tillis credit on this, but you did not hear North Carolina or Florida politicians or Louisiana politicians back in 2005 saying, hey, let's tie any help we get to some other measure like the debt ceiling. I mean, that's really deplorable.
Yeah, it is. And Mike Johnson's got no majority. He's got no sense of history. Here's a guy, I keep pointing this out, he actually believes the earth is 5,000 years old. He is a lawyer for these people, okay? I'm sorry, if you believe the earth is 5,000 years old, you're by definition stupid.
He's also scared.
And every day, he's scared and he's really stupid. He believed the earth was 5,000 years old before he even ran for Congress.
You know something, James? Scared,
I mean, that's how
scared or stupid are bad qualities. When you combine them, it's goddamn lethal.
Well, it is really lethal. It's really lethal. And boy, does he have both of them? Whew. Wow, I don't know, but he's a committed young earther. Also, as I pointed out, he's very committed to fossil fuels too, but it seems like to me the two are incompatible. But,
turning to another bad story, Jack Smith, special counsel for January 6th insurrection, issued his final report declaring that he could have convicted Trump for crimes in trying to overturn the election and inciting violence at the United States Capitol, the worst since the British in 1812 or 1814. Trump escaped for three reasons. A, Merrick Garland, a man of the law, waited too long to start a very clear-cut case. B, the Supreme Court slow-walked the case. So you reach a point where even if he had indicted, you couldn't have completed a trial, and the Justice Department says you can't take action, you can't send a sitting president to jail. So that's what happened. He got off really, in a very, very slippery way. The report does have some corroborating information. Trump's loyalist at Justice, Jeffrey Clark, privately confirmed to the coup-supporting Congressman Scott Perry, we don't really have anything here. You know something, James? That's because they didn't have anything here. There was no cheating, to speak. There was nothing that would have changed the election. It was all made up, and Trump knew it. And he got out because of the clock. But for the history books, it is clear. Trump tried to overturn a legitimate election in which he lost. He was a loser. And then he encouraged a violent insurrection at the United States Capitol. That is in addition to being a convicted felon.
So there is so much to learn from Merrick Garland. All right? Merrick Garland is the kind of grew up and was the kind of pinnacle of what the American legal system should produce. He went to, I'm sure, an Ivy League law school. I can't remember which one, but I know he did. He was a model jurist. He was appointed for the Supreme Court by President Obama in an act of callousness that I don't know if it is all time. Said we're just not going to vote. All right. And so Merrick Garland stays on the Court of Appeals, never gets on the Supreme Court. And then President Biden appoints him Attorney General. Now, this is where the whole thing comes into focus. Merrick Garland, after all of this, acted like everything was legit. It's all on the up and up. And, the institutional trust of the Justice Department had been desired. The Attorney General is typically above partisanship. He doesn't even, now he's sitting there with his own two fucking eyes on January the 6th. He hadn't even taken office. And he sees the greatest crime against the United States since Fort Sumter. And he's sitting there reading and writing memos. He didn't even get around to it until literally his hand was forced by people saying what was going on. So Smith comes in, seems to be a totally admirable person, a totally committed prosecutor, but doesn't have any time. And then by the time he concludes, it's too late. But the entire mistake was made. Was Garland and a lot of us, we proceeded as if this was something legit. That, you had Republicans that come in, you had Democrats, not like Republican policies, but, John Ashcroft, it was a legit guy, or Edward Levi was a legit guy, and you had some that wasn't so good. There was nothing legit about this. Of any human being in the United States politics that should have known it was not legit. It was Merrick Garland. All right. But a lot of people heralded his appointment. And that this was going to be a return to normalcy. This was going to be, by every account, a utterly dignified, polite, honest, law-abiding man who had no fucking idea of the circumstances he was placed in.
Yeah.
None. And you know, a lot of us, so, you know, now we face with this question that, you know, the hosts of this show, most of the people that like the show could be described as law-abiding, center-left, compassionate, tolerant, inclusive people who, you know, have some reverence for the Constitution of the United States. You know, Martin Luther King, people loved, well, the arc of history bends toward justice. Well, I'm sorry, Dr. King, but fuck that. The arc of history bends toward going right in the ditch, because that's where the arc of history is going right now. And we have to quit repeating these bromides and bullshit to ourselves and know exactly the situation we're in. The arc of history is in the ditch, and Merrick Garland.
James, if you want further evidence of that, just look at Trump's Attorney General appointee, who had her confirmation hearing this week. Pam Bondi has escaped a lot of attention because some of the others are so bad. So they haven't focused on her ethics, which really have been questionable. They haven't focused on her misrepresentations. She still says the 2020 election was stolen. And she's going to be the next attorney general. And she has one client as attorney general. It is not the American people. Her client is Donald Trump. And as I say, there were others that were worse. I watched 5.5 hours, James. I mean, was tortuous, of the defense secretary nominee, Fox News host Pete Hegseth's hearings. It was appalling. He displayed a total lack of qualifications, tried to paper it over with bluster and evasion. And as for his sordid sexual life, he said, well, this was all left-wing, anonymous, false charges. And he kept repeating his devotion to Jesus and that he and his wife prayed. So finally, Tim Kaine, you know Tim Kaine very well. He's not what you would call a hard-ass political warrior. Tim Kaine said to him in 2017 in a California hotel, you had an incident in which a woman claims you raped her. You said, no, it was consensual sex. That's a given. It happened. He also paid for her silence. At that time, Kaine said, you were married, weren't you? He evaded the answer. The answer was yes. You also had a 2-year-old child, didn't you, at that time with another woman? He evaded. The answer was yes. So whether it was rape or consensual act, what does that say about your character? And he just reverted to, well, it was false charges by, left-wing anonymous sources. I mean, it really was. It was just terrible, James. And then, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I refer you to an article about Pam Bondi, about the greatest apologist for illegitimacy in the United States, named Elie Honig. Okay, Elie Honig is an educated man. He seems to be able to string the sentence together. And this idiot thinks the whole thing is legit. Okay, that's the problem. Is that people that should know better are, again, driving the arc of history in the ditch. And I just got to tell you, this is a failure to understand. The Headspace stuff is a complete failure to understand anything to understand. And Senator Kaine, I taught 3 years at Northern Virginia Community College, 9 years at Tulane, 4 years at LSU. I've had hundreds of guests. He might have been the most impressive guest I ever had. He came talk to my community college class when he was governor. So you can't say enough about Senator Kaine that's favorable to me. But this is not like a legit hearing. Do you think the FBI is really a legit organization? Honestly, I mean, I know it's a terrible thing to say.
Let me come to their defense in that they investigate what they are told to investigate in confirmation hearings, and they are told by the administration. So I agree. It's a sham investigation, but that's not the FBI's fault, really.
Well, the administration that's in power right now is the Biden administration.
Well, but they were vetting Trump administration nominees.
So the FBI is part of a thing where an incoming person, we have a cabinet appointment, okay, Secretary of Defense, and they're not allowed to investigate the person, to do like somebody wants to get a security pass at the White House. I've been interviewed before. They only can. Well, that's not a legit deal.
They never.
It's not. Then they should tell us.
They
that.
never. They never interviewed Hegseth's ex-wife. They never interviewed the woman who accused him of rape. No, you're right. It's not a legitimate deal.
So they're being part of a scam. Yeah. All right. But that's a problem.
It is.
They're supposed to be the FBI. Are you supposed to shit the FBI when they call and ask you something? You're supposed to tell the truth. You're supposed to pay attention. That's J. Edgar Hoover. That's Elliot Ness. That's the people that, take down criminals and watch, series and documentaries and shit. So they just participate in a scam. Well, you're not legit. The whole thing is just, we are living in a country that is built on just bullshit. There's no institutions left. They're being destroyed day by day, and everybody seems to, not everybody, but most people seem to shrug their heads and say, well, what can you do?
I wish I could take issue with that bleak picture, but it's very hard to, James. I'm afraid, I really am afraid you're right. And, one of the things I noticed, Pam Bondi, the chairman of that Judiciary Committee, who once was, fairly tough on these things, is 91-year-old Chuck Grassley, who, I'm sorry, is over the bend. And they don't care. I think they'll get every nominee. Tulsi Gabbard may have trouble. But, they're going to get Kash Patel. They're going to get Pam Bondi. They're going to get Pete Hegseth. It's just, and these are all people who are eminently unqualified for these jobs.
Please don't anybody talk about, quote, the rule of law, unquote. Right. I mean, don't bring that to me. Don't bring this court. Don't bring, if one person in the world should have known the whole thing was not legit, it was Merrick Garland. And this poor man drove his reputation, which was sterling, I suspect for good reason, through just weakness in believing in bullshit, right in the ditch. And when are we going to learn that if you play on one side, so we say, we're rules-based. It's the kind of stuff that cracks me up. We're rules-based. We're a nation of laws. If one side is playing by the rules, if we're playing with 11 people on the field and they're playing with 16, we still say, well, you know what, man, we got to admit it, we were offsides. All right, we're still there trying to play by the rules, but they think rules are a sign of weakness, of bullshit. Why would I ever do that when I can circumvent them all and no one's going to do anything about it? And Merrick Garland is going to sit on his ass for 2 years, and we'll just stretch this thing out, and it's all over. It's all bullshit.
Well, they pulled it off. James, let me ask you another question about Trump. Trump has suggested that we take Greenland, not ruling out by force or the Panama Canal Treaty. Why would that be different than Russia going and trying to take Ukraine, or if China goes after Taiwan? Well, there is a difference. Greenland is more than 3,000 miles away from America, while Taiwan is only 100 miles off the China coast. But is there any difference in principles here?
Well, I'm sure you did, but Tom Friedman answers this question, I think, very intelligently and very articulately. Right. That how are you going to take, if you're going to take Greenland or the Panama Canal, how are you going to tell us we have common language, common history, we have common ancestors, we have relatives? Who are you to say that we shouldn't take Taiwan? Or it just becomes might makes right. Okay, well, we know what happens in history to that. Czechoslovakia, when it comes to kind of mine and if there's something you see and you want it, well, if I have more power, why not take it?
Yeah.
If I'm walking down the street and I have $55 in my wallet and the guy on the street corner says, that old man is 80 years old. I'm 27. I want that $100. I'll just take it. That's the same level of fucking rationale that you have now. It's nothing legit about any of this shit.
James, one more before we get to a really interesting guest, and that's Joe Biden. Joe, would you pack your bags and go home? The State Department speech, okay. Interviews and press conferences are disasters. A reminder of why you dragged down Democrats last fall. You said you could have won the election if you'd stayed in. No, you could not have. And that came not from critics or that came from Democratic pollsters. You said that you blasted the Justice Department for its case against Hunter Biden. I said there was legitimate reason to pardon Hunter Biden, not because of Justice Department malfeasance, but because Trump would have used it for nefarious purposes. Joe, you had an admirable 50-year record. If only you would have not run the last year. It's very sad.
I was watching the movie Moneyball when Art Howe said to Billy Beane, you have a contract, and I won 102 games last year. And Billy Beane said, well, the only one that counts is your last one. And Joe Biden has had a 102-game winning career, but his last one was really bad, and that's what he's going to be remembered for. And it's a shame, but he wasn't done in by, he was, what is it, Pogo? We've met the enemy, and it's us. He's his own worst enemy.
It's us, yeah.
But he does have a 102-win season, which ain't bad. But he really lost. He
lost the series.
He lost the series 4-0.
And gave us Donald Trump.
Yeah. Get the sleep you need with a delicious cup of Beam. I tell you, stuff tastes good, and it really does help you get sleep. It's a hell of a product. It's a good combo. Sometimes the stuff helps you, but it tastes like crap. This actually, you want to taste it, and it does help. Can't say anything better about saying in that.
No. We've all had a lot of sleepless nights after the election, but it's time for all to get rested up so we can take on the year ahead. Now, remember, good sleep is a foundation of our mental and physical health. And whether you're a podcaster out in the elements or in an office, it can make all the difference. That's why I'm so excited to talk about Beam Dreams Powder, a science-backed, healthy nighttime blend for sleep that is actually clinically shown to improve sleep and have you waking up refreshed. Everything changed when we found out about Dream. It's clinically shown to improve sleep, and let me tell you, it works now. You can finally say goodbye to grogginess, start sleeping through the night, and wake up refreshed. Once we started getting better sleep, we realized our energy and focus came back fast. Now we're tackling our days instead of just getting through them. Other sleep aids can cause next-day grogginess, but Dream contains an all-powerful, all-natural blend of reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. Looking ahead to 2025, we're determined to keep this momentum going, and making Dream a part of your nightly routine makes all the difference. Now, if you're like us and struggled with sleep last year, there's no better way to start 2025 than with consistent, restful nights. Dream will help you feel your best every single day. Don't wait. Get the ultimate sleep refresh for the new year. Try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder and get up to 40% off for a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com/warroom and use the code WARROOM at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/warroom and use the code War Room for up to 40% off. The link is in the show notes. James, our guest is Brian Tyler Cohen, a progressive rock star in the non-mainstream media, podcast, books, social media site, almost 3 million viewers on his YouTube channel. He can teach us a lot, to put it mildly. Brian, let me start off. Go back 7, 8 years ago. You were a bright, young, aspiring journalist, degree from Lehigh University. What did you aspire to then? Did you aspire to a job at the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Philadelphia Inquirer?
No, actually, I aspired to work in the entertainment industry, and that's why I moved out to LA. I wanted to be a TV or film executive. That was my initial goal, and so I came out here and kind of got used to being in front of the camera. But I think all along my actual passion was politics, and even while I was working odd jobs, I would just one of my first jobs while I was working out in LA was just at a gym at night, and I would just sit there and read the New York Times all night, and I would write articles freehand and then go home, type them up, and submit them to HuffPost. So I always loved politics, and it was a lot more fulfilling than TV and film was for me.
Well, you are enormously successful in a venue that is, I think it's fair to say, is dominated by the right. Michael Tomasky says that the right-wing media ecosystem in its entirety is more influential than the mainstream media. 2 questions. Why has it been so much easier for the right to dominate in this area? And what can aspiring progressives learn from your success?
So it's been a lot easier for them because they've always felt that the mainstream media was the liberal media. And so they've felt that if they want to have a voice, they have to try and embrace media in other avenues. And so they never viewed CBS, NBC, ABC, CNN as their voice anyway. And so more than a decade ago, they started deferring to new media, digital media, independent media. And so they started building up their presence in podcasts, in online, on their own journalistic ventures. I mean, Daily Wire, Dan Bongino, all of these things they started building up years and years and years ago, expressly because they didn't see their views represented in what we view as legacy media, mainstream media. And so that's the difference. And it also accounts for why the Democrats have been left behind, because we all know that those legacy media institutions, they actually bend over backwards not to be considered liberal media. And often they take their cues from the right. They allow the right to be their assignment editors so that they don't get that label of being liberal media. That's why we see, 69 cover stories in the New York Times about Hillary Clinton's emails. But that explains the asymmetry there. Democrats have just kind of rested on their laurels while they just presumed that the legacy media outlets of the world are gonna speak for them, and yet these are not partisan institutions. And yet on the other side, we have institutions that were built up expressly to be the Republican answer to what they viewed as the liberal media. And so you've got overtly Republican media on the right. You've got mainstream media, which of course the right views as liberal, but those institutions themselves don't view them as liberal, and again bend over backwards not to be viewed as liberal. And so that's the asymmetry on full display. To answer the second part of your question, what can Democrats do? I think we needed to learn yesterday that legacy media is not on our team in the same way that conservative media is on the Republicans' team, are extensions of the Republican Party, are propaganda arms of the Republican Party, and to both invest in and support independent media that is going to stand up for the values of Democrats, of progressive values, whatever it may be. But until we learn that we've got to stop heaping all of this validation onto the same mainstream media that 5 minutes later we'll turn around and complain about. Until we learn that lesson, that asymmetry is going to continue to exist.
I had I teach a class at Penn. I had Grover Norquist up one time, and he said the New York Times and the Washington Post worry about being even-handed. He said, our people say fuck even-handed. And I think that's exactly the point you're making. And it's true. Tell me more about the audience that they're getting, that you're getting, and what Democrats who worry just about the Times or NBC or the Post, what they're missing.
I think it's clear that with the audience that consumes the Times, the Post, regular legacy media, that audience is, we already know that that those are high information voters who largely skew Democratic. And it's also a shrinking pool of people. So there's two disadvantages there. One, you're talking to very few people. And two, the people who you're talking to are largely already bought in. They're largely Democratic voters anyway. And so really by heaping that validation onto legacy media, you're bringing sand to the beach, so to speak. You're just talking to people who you've already got. And so if you look at the audience in the independent media space, that's pretty much everybody else. I mean, I think we have to disabuse ourselves of the notion that it's just like young people or like millennials who are online or Gen Z who are just online. Everybody is online. And not just that. These are people who are largely persuadable. I mean, the people who consume right-wing media online right now are people who A, we were never able to get through legacy media channels, and B, those people clearly were persuadable because Republicans were successful at persuading them. And so that's the universe of people that we need to be looking at if we want to expand our coalition to have any chance of winning in the future.
So if you're Donald Trump and his people, his acolytes in this next administration, he, because of his ego, worries about Maggie Haberman in the New York Times, but most of them aren't going to worry a whole lot about the mainstream media. They have their own media. Is that fair?
I think it's fair. I mean, look, how many mainstream media interviews did Trump cancel in the lead up to the election? What about the fact that he forewent rallies in Wisconsin in deference to rallies in Coachella, California, and Madison Square Garden, because he knows that the media environment that we have right now is nationalized, and that if you want to reach people in Wisconsin, ironically, the best way to do it is probably by going to Madison Square Garden in New York to be able to actually make the news. And so I do think that knowing the new media environment that we're living in right now, yes, there is the ego component. And I do think to some degree that's important to him. But really, if you're talking about persuasion, if you're talking about reaching people that you need to reach to ultimately vote for you so that you can gain power and get into office, those people are going to be found online. They're not going to be found reading the New York Times, the Washington Post.
James.
So let's do a little role playing here. Let's assume I'm the newly elected chairman of the Democratic National Committee. I call you and I say, all right, man, this is the deal. I'm going to pay you a lot of money and I'm going to give you free reign because obviously when it comes to the media or communicating with people, I don't know whether to scratch my watch or wind my ass. So you go about it. What do you do? How are you going to build? You have carte blanche to build the communications department of the Democratic National Committee. And I've got Reid Hoffman's giving me $5 million. You can spend it wherever, any kind of way you want to, but just go out and get something done and tell me what the fuck you're doing. What would you do? You're on the clock, 180 seconds.
You go out, you find progressive or Democratic outlets, people who are going to actually fight for progressive ideals. You find them whether it's written outlets, whether it's creators, anybody in the independent media space, and make sure that they can sustain themselves in doing so, in doing this job as a standalone job, without worrying about doing any other job that they can't do this full time. Give them the resources they need, whether it's editors.
So you would make grants to outlets?
Absolutely. Find them editors, find them bookers, find them researchers, find them experts, so people know how to succeed on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and every other social media platform. Build up this creator class. And it doesn't just have to be video content. It can be written content, but it has to be in the independent media space. We spent, $2 billion in this last election cycle, basically farting money into the wind.
I think it's $4 billion, but that's okay. But we can discuss that. Yes, keep going.
Ads that went in one ear and out the other, and yet we have to recognize that when people build their political ideologies, they're not doing it because of some ad that they saw running during some football game on CBS one time in October. They build their political worldview, their political ideologies through these people who they spend hours and hours and hours listening to on a daily basis the other 11 months during the year when there's not an election. These are people who become trusted voices for people. That's how the information environment works right now. And the fact that Democrats are still under this notion that we can build up our political ideologies just by virtue of seeing a few ads in October of an election year is completely backwards and archaic.
So, but my understanding is the Paris campaign itself is going to be somewhere around $1.5 billion. Future Forward is $1 billion. All right? And I'll guarantee you, amalgamated other people, another half. There was $4 billion spent. To my knowledge, unfortunately, do you think we got a single vote that we weren't going to get anyway?
Look, I don't want to say no, because I think that's probably a vast overgeneralization. Okay. But right. I can say that Republicans were way more effective at spending their money. They know how to break through in this media environment, both with the ads that they put forward, with the way that they speak to people, and with the messengers that they found to actually push that message forward. And so I think in terms of the effectiveness of the money that was spent, Republicans far exceeded what Democrats were able to do. And I know that Democrats had more money than Republicans, but Republicans were able to spend their money more effectively. And that's because they have spent so much time investing in the right avenues. It's not just about the amount of money that you're able to raise, it's how you actually spend that money and what the message is, who the messengers are. And Republicans were able to far exceed what Democrats were able to do with their money.
So, okay, so you say first thing is we have to identify, nurture potential progressive outlets of any type.
Yeah.
Would you recommend like going on the road and doing seminars and inviting them and doing a class on web design or editing or research? Would you do that kind of stuff too?
Look, I think there are already people out there who are doing the thing online. It's just a matter of making sure that we have people who are able to find them and basically nurture them from there. I don't think it's a matter of like going on the road and doing an American Idol circa 2000 style search for the next like progressive media star. But I do think that there are people who've already taken the initiative and who don't have the means to make this their full-time job, who don't have the know-how to know, okay, maybe I'm successful on TikTok, but I don't know how to break through onto YouTube or vice versa. There's a lot of different social media platforms. A lot of this is just making sure that people have the ability to do what they're good at doing full time and to be able to succeed at the top of their skill set that they might not have at this point.
Albert?
Yeah, boy, this is fascinating. I mean, basically, the mainstream media has been a useful idiot for Trump and the right wing.
I think absolutely. I think that he is very good at knowing how to game the refs, and he's proven that over and over again. I mean, like I said at the top, the mainstream media, I think, is just as concerned about anything as not seeming liberal. And so in their quest to not seem like the liberal media, because God forbid they seem like the liberal media, they'll take their cues from the right. And so when the right pops up these stories, and when I say the right, this is partisan outlets, when the right surfaces these stories that are intended to hurt Democrats, the liberal media, the legacy media knows that if they don't take the bait, that they risk being called the liberal media. And so they'll take the bait. And that's why we're left with all of these cover stories, again, about Hillary's emails, these cover stories about whatever it is that Republicans surface that they pretend is the gravest national security threat that we're facing right now. Hunter Biden, how much time did we waste? How much ink was spilled on Hunter Biden, on some private citizen whose actions had no bearing on the U.S. government? And yet that's all we heard about over and over and over again. Or these false equivalencies between Biden and Trump, the Biden crime family, and what Donald Trump actually was convicted of and indicted for. So, of course, the legacy media has proven itself useful idiots for Trump and the Republicans. They know how to game the refs, and they're able to do that because we have a media ecosystem on the quote-unquote left that just really exists to try and prove that they're not on the left. And so they'll do whatever the Republicans tell them to do.
Another example is all the stories about James Comer and James Jordan and the scorching investigation. It came up, not only did they come up with nothing, their best witnesses, one was a Russian agent and the other was a Chinese agent.
Correct.
But boy, there were an awful lot of stories, weren't there?
But the thing is, that part doesn't matter because it's not so much about the reality. It's not so much about the facts. It's not so much about the resolution of this stuff. It's just a matter of Republicans being able to introduce this stuff into the zeitgeist.
Right.
It's them beginning the narrative, and that's all they need because they're not gonna do any coverage of the fact checks. They're not gonna do any coverage of the resolutions. They're not gonna do any coverage of the fact that their star witness was actually a Russian asset. That part doesn't make it through. And if you ask 99 people out of 100 on the Republican side, all they'll know is the first part, is the part that they wanted to introduce into the narrative by virtue of bringing it up in the first place. So again, they've already done their job by virtue of the fact that they were able to hold these hearings. They've already done their job by virtue of the fact that they were able to introduce this stuff into the zeitgeist. It's not about the reality of it. It's not about the merits of it. It's not about the facts. It's just about the fact that they were able to introduce it in.
Brian, which Democrats get the new media landscape?
So there are a few. Ro Khanna gets it.
Hey, our friend.
Yeah.
Pete Buttigieg gets it. And I should note that Pete has been especially generous with finding new creators and giving them time and basically validating their channels. This is, I think, such an important point. Pete and Trump as well, to give him credit for this, they know that if you spend just a little bit of time with a new creator, a young creator, somebody who's just getting their start in this industry, that not only do you validate that person, but you validate that person and they become an evangelist for you. They they know that this is just how human nature works. You give them a little bit of time and you basically launch their career. They're going to spend their career then advocating for you. They're going to be a missionary for you. And so for just 10 minutes of time for Donald Trump during the 2024 election cycle, finding any creator he can, anybody with a microphone that he can, he knows that A, he can get one more person who's going to advocate for him, B, a person who's going to advocate for him forever, and C, get another voice out into the conservative media ecosystem. And so he's just building up his army. And he's able to build up that army but also by virtue of going there, he's able to validate that very army himself. And so it's such a good return on investment. Why wouldn't everybody want to do that? For just 10 minutes of your time, you add one more soldier to the army and somebody who's going to instantly seem more validated by virtue of getting a little bit of time with you. So Trump does that. Pete Buttigieg is very good about doing that. Back to those who we have on the left. Jamie Raskin has been great. Jasmine Crockett, Jared Moskowitz. I know I'm forgetting some people, but there are a few people who understand the importance of independent media and definitely lead with a digital first mindset versus other folks, obviously, who've given creators the runaround, but they'll pop up any moment of the day on CNN or MSNBC.
One Democrat that did not get it seems, is Joe Biden.
Well, to his credit, I interviewed him back in 2022, in February of 2022. And this was actually, further to his credit, this was at a moment where I was almost certain that interview was going to be canceled because it was the day after Russia invaded Ukraine and the day that he also announced Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court. So a pretty busy day. And to his credit, they kept the interview on the books and I was the first creator to interview him. So I think that the White House has been pretty nimble, especially for a very unnimble institution, has been pretty nimble in terms of embracing digital media.
Do they follow up with you afterwards for more interviews?
They were good partners in terms of making sure that people in the administration were available. And so I had the opportunity to speak to everybody from Jennifer Granholm, Gina Raimondo, Pete Buttigieg. I know I'm forgetting people now.
No,
but
that's really that's good to know. I'm a little surprised, but that's really good to know. James?
So I've done well by legacy media, and one of the things is that we operate under a burden. If I went out and lied to people, I would get shit for it. People say, James, you can't say that shit. That's just an out-and-out lie.
Yeah.
Okay. Their people actually want to be lied to.
Right.
And so you start with an audience that actually has some reverence for the truth. and they start with an audience that just wants people to make shit up and let it just fit their worldview, like California ran out of water, okay? You start at a big disadvantage because the truth is hard sometimes. It's difficult. And if you just make up anything you tell people, then they believe it. You got to be 4 times as good to be equally effective in that environment, I think. But do you see like the truth is something that is an impediment to us?
I don't see it as an impediment to us. I mean, it's an impediment in the broader scheme because we are at a disadvantage. We are dealing, like the fish rots from the head, right? Donald Trump has told more than 30,000 lies when he was president. He lies every time he opens his mouth. That's what his audience is primed to hear. That's what they want to hear. Democrats can't do that if there is that massive asymmetry that exists. And you're right, we do have to be that much better to be able to overcome a side that has no scruples whatsoever. It's difficult to understand how we can succeed in an environment that's A, a post-truth environment, B, one where we're already at a massive disadvantage because of the size and scope of the right-wing media machine. So yeah, I mean, this is why it's so difficult. And I've often wrestled, even with other creators that I've spoken to, how do we contend with a right-wing media ecosystem where they can say whatever they want and they don't get punished for it? And B, there's so many more of them. And I think the answer right now, and it seems impossible, and it can also feel discouraging as a creator because I feel like there's so much more of a burden on the shoulders of people like me because we have to operate at this huge disadvantage in this space that where all eyeballs are trained on right now. But I think the answer, going back to what we had spoken about previously, is just to get more people into this space and to know that in this attention economy, it's a fight for eyeballs, it's a fight for ears. And if we can get more voices out there, that's how we kind of whittle down the advantage that Republicans or the right has right now. But it's just a matter of getting more people out there, getting more people in front of audiences. And there's a lot of different niches. There's a lot of different audiences. Republicans have been better at commanding audiences with culture. And somewhere along the line, over the last decade, Democrats have largely lost or ceded culture to the right. Politics is downstream of culture. And when we have our political podcast, they're focused on politics. Republicans are able to build their worldview by basically red pilling folks who consume content that's politics adjacent. And so they'll get comedians, they'll get sports, and those people, a lot of their political ideologies are informed by the right. But when people become fans of those people, they're not doing it expressly for politics first. They're listening to those people for their comedy, for their sports analysis, for whatever it is, right? And then come election time, now you've got these trusted messengers. Come election time, that's where they start to go into politics, and that's what informs their viewers' political worldview from that point.
That's Joe Rogan. That's Joe Rogan.
Correct. And so he doesn't talk about politics year round, but he certainly was talking about politics in September and October. And Joe Rogan's got people who listen to him 3-4 hours a day. And if you don't think that those people trust him by the time September of 2024 rolls around, October of 2024 rolls around, and certainly trust him a hell of a lot more than they're going to trust some 30-second ad that pops up on CBS, you're kidding yourself.
So one more question, it's an observation I made. So there's this whole ecosystem. I mean, it's Fox, it's Newsmax, it's influencers, it's talk radio, it's town hall, it's everything. And they kind of, so Hunter Biden, everybody is on the Hunter Biden story.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just, so if the Democrats, if the left of center people, if somebody says, so you and I say, we really want to stress the billionaire class. All right. You would have a lot of people say, you're not the fucking boss of me. I want to talk about transgender rights. I want to talk about climate change. I want to talk about this. I'm not taking any fucking orders from you or Carville and these other goddamn people. I think you know everything. But that's part of the nature of what it is to kind of be a liberal is I do what the fuck I want to do.
Yeah.
And we don't fall in line at all, not even for the greater good. So look, we can talk about all this, but right now, this is what we need to drive home. And do you think we can actually be capable of this at some soon point in history where we go like, okay, let's all get the same hymnal out and turn to page 42. All right, let's all sing together. I never see that happening with us, but go ahead.
I do. I absolutely think that we are in an age right now where I think Democrats or those on the left rightly recognize the extent to which Republicans are able to coordinate and organize their messaging. For my entire life paying attention to politics, Republicans have, it looks like they come out of the morning meeting and starting at 5 a.m. on Fox and Friends, all the way to like Judge Jeanine and Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham are completely coordinated in their messaging. Right. And Democrats, because we're the party that focuses on climate change, on women's reproductive rights, on healthcare, on gun safety, on every issue under the sun, which especially right now, are all under attack, we'll go in 10 different directions. And that's very much following the Steve Bannon model of flooding the zone with shit. And they know that if they can dangle carrots every which way, that Democrats will scatter in 10 different directions in trying to fight them. And by virtue of doing that, by virtue of scattering in those 10 different directions, we muddle down our message to basically nothing. If we're talking about 10 different things, then we're really talking about nothing. If everything is a 5-alarm fire, nothing is a 5-alarm fire. And so I think there's a recognition of that right now. And yes, I know that Democrats have this reputation of being the party that doesn't fall in line. But I think there is an absolute thirst right now for Democrats to be able to push back effectively when it comes to messaging. And so even very recently this year, I've started a messaging meeting in the mornings with a big group of creators, and I'll continue to expand that. And anybody who wants to come in is more than welcome to come in. But it's to focus our messaging. And that means that we can focus on things that I think are going to be most persuasive to people watching. And it also means that some stuff is going to get left on the cutting room floor that in a normal world we'd be able to focus on and would already be disqualifying. But not everything is going to work in this media environment. And, you know, if you're dealing, for example, with the confirmations and you've got somebody like Kash Patel right in front of you and Tulsi Gabbard right in front of you, but then somebody who is like Pete Hegseth, who unto himself is also probably the most disqualifying nominee that you could find. Well, if you know that you only have limited political capital, you have to focus on the things that are imminently dangerous. And I think that and that's one example, right? And there's going to be a million more examples as we get into the Trump era.
Work hard, play hard with Zbiotics. Can I tell you that, you know, when you got to go up to one, if you're a journalist or you're a campaign operative or if you're anything, you know, the competition is up early and the competition is feeling good. And you got to be out late working, so you better get up early and you better be feeling good or you're going to get run over.
Yeah, and let's face it, after a night with drinks, we aren't bouncing back the next day like we used to. It used to be a big decision. Do you want a great night or a great next day? Luckily, with pre-alcohol, you don't have to compromise. Now, let me fill you in. Zbiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Now, here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that is to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme that breaks this byproduct down. Just remember, to make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Thanks to Zbiotics, James even goes on long runs after his long nights. Every time you have a Zbiotics pre-alcohol before the drink, it makes a difference. Now, after drinks at a client dinner, we know we can jump into action right after waking up. Whether you're writing all day, exercising, or even going in front of an audience, Zbiotics is the MVP when it counts. Make sure it's in your lineup too. Now go to zbiotics.com/PWR to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use the code PWR at checkout. Zbiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com HelloFresh.com/PWR and use the code PWR at checkout for 15% off. The link is in our show notes. Now for the outrage of the week. I watched almost 5 hours of the hearings on Pete Hegseth to be a Secretary of Defense. As we discussed, he is uniquely unqualified. One of the best questions, by the way, was the new Senator Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan, who really, really nailed him. You could see his discomfort. There was one issue that didn't come up. It's not as big as the others. It may not have made any difference with voters, but it attests to either his ignorance or his bigotry. Hegseth opposes the renaming of Army bases that were named after Confederate generals, especially North Carolina's Fort Bragg, where he trained. Mr. Defense Secretary-to-be, a little history lesson. Camp Bragg, later Fort Bragg, was named for Braxton Bragg, a slave-owning Confederate general. Historians rate him one of the very worst Civil War generals, despised by many of his soldiers. Fort Bragg was named for this ne'er-do-well more than a half century after the Civil War, probably to stick it to its black citizens. So, Mr. Hegseth, I don't know, were you unaware of this history and spat it off out of ignorance, or is one of your models a racist incompetent?
Well, that's a pretty good one. I got to tell you, in most of them, like Fort Polk was after a particularly buffoon. I think it was like a Episcopal clergyman, Leonis Polk. But I mean, you can go through, every fool. What about Fort Hood? Yeah. Okay, I'd like to be led in a battle by John Bell Hood. Maybe you could go to Franklin and see how you ended up. But yes, I think there's enough honorable, noble people, inclusive, pluralistic people that have been outstanding military figures that you could name our military installations. Frankly, I'd just call them all Fort Grant. But
I might toss in a Sherman in the meantime.
Maybe so. Or Eisenhower. Or Pershing. Or George Washington. Or General Honore. Matthew Richmond. But anyway, the insult of it is we've just got tons of really talented, quality people we could do that for. Name every naval base, Nimitz, Doris Miller.
Right.
Take control of your kitchen with HelloFresh. Well, not only is it easy and convenient, it also tastes good, which is, a big factor. This is a terrific service. You know exactly what you're getting. It's easy and it's tasteful, and it can be very healthy. It's got a lot going for it, I can tell you that.
It does. With HelloFresh, you get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your door. There are no trips to the grocery store, no planning, no menus, no grocery list, and no wasted ingredients. So count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. HelloFresh makes it easy to find the time to eat well with 50 wholesome, hassle-free meals to choose from every week, all delivered to your front door. The lineup of prep and bake meals come with minimal mess and takes only 5 minutes of prep. That way, you can start letting your oven do most of the work. After all, you have better things to do with so many options. You'll always have incredible meals ready to go for any occasion. Plus, HelloFresh recipe includes high-quality, sustainably sourced ingredients, like produce that comes fresh from the farm, so you know you're getting the good stuff. It's a great way to break a takeout addiction and level up your cooking skills. James, you always feel great preparing food for your family after switching to HelloFresh, and it's a great excuse to get everyone together. Now, one of the best things about HelloFresh is that it works with your schedule. Their plans are flexible, and you can change your meal preferences, update your delivery day, and change your addresses with a few taps on the HelloFresh app. So don't wait. Right now, they have a special deal for you. Go to get up to 10 free meals and a free high-protein item for life at HelloFresh.com/warroom10FM. One item per box with an active subscription. Free meals are applied at a discount on the first box. New subscribers only. Varying by plan, that's up to 10 free HelloFresh meals. Just go to HelloFresh.com/warroom10FM. Look for the link to this deal from HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit, in the show notes. And now for our listener questions, always a highlight because they are so good. Ed in Raleigh, North Carolina. James, this is a subject you've thought about. Is John Fetterman just opportunistically sliding into the Mansion Cinema position now that they're gone?
You know, I used to, he told me to shut the fuck up. And at the time, I took mild offense. I no longer take offense. I honestly think the guy's had a major health issue in his life, and I think he just wants to get his name in the paper. And, you know, he was the most progressive person. He was a Bernie bro, and he was this, and now he wants to meet with Trump. And he's fighting with me, fights with the governor. I think he's a guy that's got pretty, in his mind, I don't know, but no idea what his current state of his health is, but I think he's like, I'm just going to do everything I can to get as much publicity I can and run this thing as hard as I can till my term's up in 2026. That's what I think. I think the guy's like, he's just desperate to get attention.
Is he up in 26? I thought it was 28. Maybe.
Well, it's 22 and 6. Yeah. It is 28. I'm sorry. It's 28.
So he's got the whole.
It's 28. So he's got some time.
Yeah, and what it is,
but
it's not, it'll be very few times where his vote is decisive. But what he does is he'll give the Republicans a patina of bipartisanship on some things, and he'll just be he'll be a nuisance.
If he gets his name in the paper, it gets on the news, or whatever. I think that's his short, immediate, and long-term goal.
Nate in Leavenworth, Kansas, he's not in the prison there, I'm sure, asks, is Trump doing all this Greenland nonsense so he can have a reason to take economic measures against Denmark, thereby causing the EU to react against the United States? I don't think it's quite that planned or orchestrated. Nate, I think he's doing it just to get attention and to distract from some of his problems. I don't think we'll be talking about Greenland in 6 months.
So let's think about this. The single most repeated, consistent, and, by the way, memorable campaign pledges was Trump constantly saying he was going to do something about prices, and specifically grocery prices. Okay, this was really the kind of focal point of this campaign. And, when you do the exit polls, you interview people, and it was the sense that inflation, did President Biden in. It was, I suspect maybe it's not all true, but it clearly is mostly true, and more true than anything else responsible for his election. Right after he's elected, he said two things. Well, I really can't do anything about high prices, which is just backed away from the most repeated campaign promise of this century, and then said, I want to buy Greenland. Well, we talk on the show, talk about the failure of the media, the failure of non-right-wing media to be consistent. We all talked about Greenland. And if it wasn't enough, then we talked about the Panama Canal. I can't remember seeing a story about how Trump backtracked immediately on the most prominent campaign pledge of the 21st century. And that's what it's all about. And Trump has figured out that he can break any promise, do anything he wants. You just have to give people something else outrageous to follow. And that's just what it is. So he just says, well, I can't do anything about high prices, but I'll threaten to buy Greenland, and everybody's talking about Greenland.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what he wants. He is a master at diversion. He is just a master at diversion.
Well, we are masters at getting diverted.
Right. Yeah.
It takes two. Yeah, it takes two. It takes two to tango. You got, when there's a massive diversion, it takes the divertor, and it takes the person that allows themselves to be diverted. And that's the issue. He's not going to change. The only people who can change is us. And we have to see through this.
Gary in London asks, is it better to get off of Twitter or fight back with our best arguments on the platform? Well, as a minimal Twitter user, I don't think it matters a whole lot. I don't think you're going to have mass defections. Elon Musk has decided to use it as his propaganda tool, and that's what he's doing. And that's what he's going to continue to do, whether you get on it or get off it.
Well, I mean, I think our show today, and we can talk about this more and more, is, we got to do better at communicating across all kinds of different platforms. And I suspect that Twitter, I never had one till a movie, and the movie people opened a Twitter account for me. I have no idea what's on it. But we definitely don't exploit this to the best of our ability. And, you can curse the darkness or you can light a candle. And, now with TikTokers, I don't quite understand it, but now the spring, they may be going up in smoke. Who knows? It'll be something different a year from
James,
now.
that was supposed to be your question, but you gave a better answer than I did anyway. So I'm going to throw the next question to you, which is from Mark in Australia. We're covering the globe today. Who wants to know, why does Trump seem to get a pass on all of his flip-flops when it's previously been devastating to Democratic candidates? Remember, John Kerry, was for it before he was against it, or vice versa?
So, again, thank you for the question. And by the way, the sun he used to say the sun never sets on the British Empire. Well, the sun never sets on our listeners. Well, we got London, we got Sydney coming in. Let's get a couple here from maybe Indonesia, Africa, or the Middle East.
Okay, you hear it out there. Bring them in.
Bring them in. But again, I go back to we get this. He distracts, we get distracted, and he knows that he just ups the ante with one more outrageous thing. He knows that the people for him will make apologies for it, and knows the people that don't wish him well will just get distracted by another thing. And we got to settle in. And he said he would do something about prices. All right. And the big thing, this is the big opportunity. I was told this morning, I think this is true, that Bezos, Musk, and what's his name, Zuckerberg are going to
they announced it today.
Whatever you do, get the four of them in a picture. Okay. This is the photo that's going to do. Get a photo of them on a dais with Trump, Zuckerberg, Musk, and Bezos, because I'm going to tell you what the issue is going to be. I promise you, it's going to be a billionaire class is running Trump and is running America. And guess what? People are not going to like that. And when they try to cut Medicare or Medicaid or anything like that, just run that picture. Okay, they're not taking any. They're getting a tax break. All right, you suckers, you getting the shaft. Just keep that picture. Take 100 of those pictures, plaster it everywhere. If I was a Democrat, I'd even buy billboards, and don't tell me billboards don't work, and I'd plaster it all over the place. Who's getting the attention here in Washington? These three people, or the 335 other million people out there in the United States? It's going to be it could be a game-changing issue for us.
John in Chicago, James, says the South has been a tough battleground for Democrats usually. How does the next DNC chair determine where to spend campaign money, build up the coalition, and what are his priorities? Or her?
Well, I mean, we had Jamie Harrison, who was from South Carolina, as she does, and it is a very challenging environment, to say the least, in the South for Democrats. we got to recruit better. All I can tell you is I think the number one thing is candidate recruitment. We got to get, if people that do succeed, look at Roy Cooper in North Carolina. Okay, he's very, very, very successful. A lot of Democrats have succeeded in Virginia. Georgia has 2 Democratic senators. The South is some places are more promising than others, and we need to figure out where there is promise and work hard to do a little bit better. But it's challenging. There's no doubt about that. But it's not all the same.
Okay, our final question, I've kind of lost count, but I think this is the final one. It's Gerald in Nashville, Tennessee, and it's a good one, which we both can pick up on. It's become broadly accepted that Biden's policies towards immigration were a factor in his loss. Why didn't he tackle it head on? Is there some large immigration lobby he was trying to curry favor with? I want everybody out there who cares about this issue to read a piece in The Atlantic about a month ago by Frank Sherry, and I'm now forgetting the name of the woman who was in the Obama White House as an immigration advocate. Frank Sherry is one of the most effective, passionate immigration advocates I've ever known, and he talked about the way the Biden team screwed it up. They didn't focus on what the secret to immigration is to have tough, controllable borders and to admit people who deserve to be admitted and to stress how immigration is an asset. And certainly you admit the dreamers and you set a pathway for others. That was doable 15 years ago. It was doable the last couple of years. At least it was be supported. And the Biden administration, by refusing to crack down on the border, blew that chance. Frank Sherry in The Atlantic magazine.
So why did they refuse? What was the problem? Of course, the left came in and basically talked him into this kind of more or less open border policy, which turned out is everything that they bring up utter disaster. Disaster. And the sooner that we say, okay, you're really nice people, you're part of the coalition, your heart's in the right place, but you don't have the foggiest fucking idea what's going on in the world. The sooner we can say that, the better off we're going to be. But who started us down to fund the police? Who started us down Latinx? Who started us down every idiot thing that we had to get rid of Abraham Lincoln's name on schools? Who started all of that? The origin is, I'm sorry, I consider myself left to center, but there is an idiot left in the United States, and we should be nice to these people and pay utterly no attention to them.
Okay, good note to end on. Keep those letters coming in. James said he wants to hear from Indonesia and Africa and some other places. Yeah. And we love our listeners. So thank you and have a great week. Get through Monday somehow. Thanks for listening to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. Always send your questions for us by email to politicswarroom@gmail.com or tweet them for next week's show @Politicon. Following this episode, we'd appreciate it if you check out the links to our sponsors, Beam, Zbiotics, and HelloFresh in our episode show notes. We thank you for supporting them because when you do, it helps make this podcast happen. To keep up with us, subscribe to Politics War Room on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And check out our Substack at politicswarroom.com. James and I are constantly adding new content, so go take a look. You can also find other shows you might enjoy on the Politicon YouTube channel or when you search Politicon on your favorite podcast sites. And remember, please rate the show with a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with another show as we continue our War Room planning.